Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Today I wanted to talk about making REST APIs and making them AI usable. I think now every single person in this room is contractually obligated to do at least one AI thing a year. So this is my contractually obligated one. I also want to do a minute of silence for all the DevOps teams that got a letter from their CTO that we need to provision capacity for the OpenAI open source models so that everybody can have internal LLMs. That's going to be fun. My team hasn't gotten that letter yet. They will after this talk. Yeah, this is my first time talking in fintech, so I'm very excited to be here. And why should you listen to me? Honestly, there's no reason. I've been doing this for a while. Been privileged to be the head of engineering now for 2 years of a payment processing company called Payabli. Before that, I had a different startup, successfully exited from that. And it's been a blast this past couple of years in my career, so very, very privileged to be doing the things I do. I put my GitHub there. I'm going to do something crazy and actually try to do a demo. So you'll be able to take a lot of the things I'm going to show and be able to either look at them or implement them with your different teams. So one of the things I wanted to talk about, we talked a lot about, okay, let's make MCPs, let's make MCP clients, but it's like, I haven't really seen, everybody's like 0 to 1. But I'm like, we're about the steps 2 to 99. Because those are the steps the engineering teams of all the different companies have to do with already current APIs. I'm pretty sure every single one of you here has around 200 to 300 routes, both internally and externally, that you have to manage. And you probably got a letter saying, hey, we need to NCP every single one of those routes. Don't do that, that's a bad idea. But at least a couple of those are probably NCP worthy, right? And and every single one of your teams should discuss that. Things I want to talk about, NCP ready, designing with machine first consumption, enhancing the API, and then testing, monitoring, and agent readiness, right? So what does NCP really mean? I think everybody here has done this slide in some shape, way, or form. Model, context, protocol. Agents needed because we need to provide tools to those agents so that the agents can do more than just answer simple questions. We want them to do actions, right? And what are the core principles of agents? And what are some of the anti-patterns? So these are the principles for me, for our engineering team, and how we're thinking about the transition from API and adding a new persona, which is a machine persona, to all our intent. NCP is not a protocol, it's an enhancement layer. Think about the personas. When we think about now product personas, AI is a new product persona. So you have to think about that when you're designing now new APIs and the consumption that you're doing them. Discovery is mandatory, right? If the AI doesn't know how to interact with your API, it's going to do nothing, or it's going to fumble around and burn tokens on the doing very, very interesting scraping of APIs. Predictability, trans flexibility. Like the best things I've seen recently are things where, hey, and this goes all the way back to just basic REST API conventions. One route that does something very well and is consistent, and we can repeat that the process every single time. Be explicit is better than implicit, always. And then design for the simplest client. I was gonna put something a little less HR friendly there. I'm sure you all understand what I'm talking about. But design for your simplest client. And work compose up from that persona. And you normally get to hexagonal architecture and all these fun things, but these are the principles that we and my teams like normally follow in order to like do this new transformation, right? And what does it mean to design with machine-first consumption? It goes back to what I was saying, which is before we had two personas, right? In most APIs and most companies, right? You had a user that was going to go through our UI and do a lot of UI stuff in that UI. Then you had integrators that were going to use your APIs and do a more machine-to-machine connection. If you offer payments or different embeddable components, right, that's an entire different surface. And now we have this new surface of AI consumption, right? And you need to think about how do you design most of those APIs now with, hey, not only does it need to be human readable, it needs to be machine readable as well. And how does that look like? You know, this was before. I like this because it's like the dumbest possible example I could find. But it was, hey, if response 200, between 200, 300, it's so good, parse that JSON, we got something that we need to work with. Otherwise, just log an error because something went wrong, right? I think we're all very familiar with that. And we used to do this, basically build first approach, and then we'll get back to design, we'll get back to security, we'll get back to observability and all these other things that we had to do before. And for most startups, that's what we do, right? Like we build fast, we build fast, we ship fast, we break fast, we keep building new bugs and releasing them until we get to that product that we all use, right? But taking a different approach and going more methodical back, you know, there is a spec for building REST APIs. And what's interesting about this whole AI capabilities that we're now having to deal with is, hey, some of the good ideas that existed in design and architecture are now being enforced by the needs of the customer. The customer, in this case, being the AI. So now we can go back and say, hey, before we start building a bunch of code that probably we're going to have to either refactor or throw away for X or Y reason, let's sit down as a team and let's truly design the API and what it actually needs. And if you start seeing, you'll start seeing a little bit of little words that didn't used to be there, right? XMCP capabilities. What can this endpoint actually do? And that becomes part of your build and architecture and product design when you're doing these things. If we go into a more in-depth example, when we're doing a design, this is just a simple customer route. But look at all the new additions that we were just not doing before. We're now doing descriptions. The agent needs to contextualize the tool and the action, right? We're doing if it's a tool or not. We're also doing examples. Like one of the fastest ways to get the AI to burn less tokens is to provide an example so that it can actually not have to do a double, kind of like the double reasoning approach. Okay, I know what I need to do. Let me build an example. Let me do the operation. And this is now, in my opinion, the requirements of how we need to now start building and going back to, hey, every time we design a route, what are the things that we need to do in order to get that? It's all with those very friendly annotations, and it helps us drive the development experience that we're looking for, right? So we're going to get now into the actual fun stuff. You know, we talk about like the approaches, but how, right? How do we actually do a to-do list in order for every single one of our companies to actually transform whatever amount of routes they want to do into NCPs, right? First one, define a strategy. Does every endpoint need to be converted? The answer is most likely no, because some endpoints might be exposing too much data. Like, I'll give you an example. Imagine if you had a customer that's doing 1 million transactions a day, and without proper pagination, or the AI goes hallucinogenic and starts pulling 1 million tokens per every single one of those requests, it's not gonna be a fun time for anybody. Defining the API structure, like the same as every other thing, which is, do you enhance your current endpoints? Do you build a new grouping? Why would you think about those things? The reason why you would think about those things is, hey, is your system prepared to deal with 10x the throughput that it would normally deal with human traffic? Or, hey, do I need to fully bifurcate the responsibility so that the capacity of my current system doesn't overload just because some developer is now using an AI agent? The AI agent does, let's say, 5,000 requests a second just for giggles. That might incur a load in your system that actually breaks the trust and reliability of the system that you were trying to enhance in the first place, right? Obviously, define the conversion path, rewrite versus refactor. I think that's the age-old question. I like to normally say the chicken or the egg, because it will happen at some point both. How to do it safely is the most important thing. Safety comes in two flavors. Safety comes in intent, and safety comes in measures. Like, if you're doing something that you don't have a metric for in engineering, you're probably doing something that has nothing to do with engineering, or you need to go back to the drawing board, because every single interaction that we do in engineering, AI or non-AI, has to be fully measurable, traceable, and reproducible. Define the infrastructure path, kind of like what I was saying. Do you want to do this new load on your current system? Do you want to spin up an entirely different stack in order for you to maintain the trust of the current system that you built? Not every, like, the fallacy of any system that we build is, hey, there's some limited scale. Everybody here knows that there's no such thing. There's unlimited spending on Amazon, that's for sure, but not unlimited scale. And we always have to take that into consideration when we're doing this new API conversion. And then define the security checks. I think I've seen maybe 15 articles about NCP servers that were exposing data this last month in different companies, and how that's obviously, I'd rather not do AI and not lose customer trust than do AI and lose customer trust, because those two things are not equal. We always have to abide by the customer need at the end of the day, and that is trust and security. So we have actually full new AI security assessments that we do outside of our current API route security assessment, in order for, it takes double the time, but as long as it's secure, we're getting what we want, right? So, demo time. Let's see if I don't break anything today. I'm sure my engineering team loves every time I code, so. And by the way, I'm just using C# because Payabli is a C# company, but everything here is available in every single language. So don't think too much about that. But I wanted to go into the Open API spec, because that's literally the way that I think about the capabilities that we have. And now we have a global capabilities endpoint. And this endpoint is something that you just continue to maintain with your current tooling, and as you keep exposing tools, this is the first thing the agents are going to look, hey, let me go and check the capabilities of the system. And let me see. Oh, I knew I was going to break something. There we go. So here, right, it's just giving the traditional basic stuff, nothing crazy, right? But it's going to first do that first level of inference that you need to do at a globalized scale for your API in order for them to start going into the more tool specifics, right? So let's say, for example, now I go into the order specific one, right? And I want to say, hey, what are the tools and capabilities that we have? And as you can start seeing, this is all literally metadata that we now have to build and enrich in order for the API to understand what it needs to do in order to leverage our MCP, right? So for example, let's say we're doing get description, right? Like get all the orders. Here's all the different metadata that we would actually have to build in order for the MCP and the agent to understand its context in order to fully do an action, right? What are the features that it actually has? Adding that metadata in order for it to be able to explain to either itself, a secondary agent, or just a chat prompting application, right? That's basically agent-to-agent communication, right? Even giving it rate limits. You want your other agent to not go insane against your own API. Give it the rate limits that it's supposed to have. And basically, just do the links and do the meta. If everybody, some of us remember, there was this spec called HADOAS, which was hyperlinks as a specification. I'm pretty sure somebody, when they decided the NCP protocols, decided, hey, here's the best way to do that, right? And this is just a list of different things in order for us to just do one route. One thing that I didn't have time in my demo, but I kind of really wanted to talk about is identity. And I think Jeff spoke about that this morning. When you're adding agentic capabilities and NCP capabilities, you have to do authentication of every single one of those requests, right? But one cool thing about it is, hey, what if when the agent is going to this capabilities and it was trying to fetch the capabilities that's attached to that user in that session or in that request, what if this was dynamic? And that's how we should be thinking about building capabilities, discovery endpoints for the MCPs. The list of capabilities and tooling available here should always be scoped to the proper controls that the API has, the user has in your system. That way, even two different systems or two different agents with two different sessions could just have a very linear and explicit approach into whatever they're doing. And agents, if they don't need to know what they don't need to know, like it just simplifies the entire token consumption and reasoning process. So, and I just wanted to show, this is how we used to build, data. I'm pretty sure many endpoints in life are still like this. Simple stuff, nothing crazy, right? Now we have to get into these capabilities of, hey, we want to do orders. We now have to have a higher amount of data in every single request so that not only our APIs can manage additional metadata, but also converting that into the NCP agent itself for better tooling. And by the way, we should have been doing this a while ago. Now we're being forced to. So this is something that I'm personally, as a frustrated architect, I'm very happy about. So what does, and that's just the design. So how do we take a design and convert that into a strategy, convert that into something actionable and measurable? How many of you have had to do full rewrites from like, you know, I'm going to use Rails 4 to Rails 8, or a higher version of Java, or just any mass migration that breaks like 7,000 tests, and all you did was change one number? I dealt with a couple of those. They're not fun, but they actually gave a pretty simple and consistent way that we could think about how do we progressively enhance the systems that we're building. And the answer has always been there. Just write more tests, right? Like every single route should now have a new test capacity where it's how do you test at an acceptance test level the correct structure, descriptions, and responses that an MCP-ready endpoint would need in order for us to actually just, hey, let's put that in front of the NCP server itself, and it's fully available for tooling. Why using tests? Because tests are measurable, right? It gives you an understanding of how many things you need to do in order for us to like have a definition of done, right? Which in AI, it's like we never know when the definition of done is gonna be. But one of the things I thought about, and you know, funny thing is, you guys are being the first people I'm showing this, but my teams will be getting a next one of this that actually includes implementation tickets. But the concept is, hey, I want to run, and this is defined per team, but I'm gonna build a bunch of tests. And all these tests are doing one thing, testing the NCP readiness, worthiness of every endpoint that we need to do. And as many of you know, you could build this as an AI prompt. You could just do passive code generation. You could do a snippet. But it gives you a list of, and I think I had, 13 to 16 tests that I say, hey, if we do all these tests per endpoint, that will give you a very clear goal of, is your endpoint NCP ready, yes or no? And obviously, you don't want to add this to your normal test suite or your CI/CD. You're going to break it. Don't do that. You want to just add it as a category or filter so that you can have either an AI or one of your team members working through that. Like one of my junior developers that came in recently is going to have a fun time for the next month. But having that list, and again, this is a list for me and for our teams in this demo, that list could be like, it could be 5 tests, it could be 25. But this is for, in my opinion, like a very measured and a very quantifiable approach on how do you measure progress and measure your definition of done. Another thing I wanted to show is, again, I'm gonna post this on GitHub, but it's like, hey, Johnny, I don't wanna do tests. Tests are dumb. Everything now must be done by the AI because the CEO told you everything has to be done by the AI. That's perfect. I have an answer for you too. Let me see which one it was. Yeah, this one. So as I was building this, after I built the test and working through that, this is a prompt. And you can take this prompt. I'm a fan of Claude, so this was Claude specific, but I'm sure it works in every other system. You give it the concept of, hey, you're going to be a QA, and you're going to validate every single route. What do you need to do? So you need to be an expert AI architect. That's great, like specializing. And you have to understand the requirements of every single API structure and the responses that are required, right? You need to understand what is an error. You know, there's an RSC that was called problem details on the HTTP spec since before I was born, and we still, not everybody still uses it. It bothers me to death. That becomes a now part of the NCP spec. What are the capabilities? Does every endpoint, does every route that you're working on have capabilities? And understanding the schema. What are the standardized error codes? And again, every single one of you is going to have to play around with this for your business and your company, but it's a framework, right? Understanding pagination and filtering become even more important, right? You don't want the MCP or the agent to go insane on your APIs. That has to be more airtight than ever. I really hope we also have other people that use cursor pagination rather than just skipping pages. That's going to take a couple tokens. So that's always a fun time. And then the validation process. Like, what is all the steps the agent needs to do, and how do I want you to respond to me in regards to being MCP ready? Am I partially, right? Sometimes I'm partially. Sometimes, hey, I'm just a traditional API. You have work to do. And what is the checklist and detail analysis that you need to do? Identify the missing components. And give me an output format so that I can put it in a nice Google document or Confluence or whatever your favorite note-taking system so that you can send it to every single one of your CEOs and founders and say, hey, I'm doing something. And we continue like this, right? And I think you get the point of this is just a framework of context that transforms your LLM as a coding assistant into a full QA process that follows. And then it's going to basically build that list so that we can start building tests. It could actually build the test for you. It actually built some of mine when I was doing this demo. So this was a prompt that I worked on for like a day and a half in order to get it to this level of specificity where, and what's one cool thing about this, if any of you have done major refactorings, don't do it all at once. No developer wants to do a 5,000 file pull request review, nor any team. I get very angry emails from my own team every time that happens. So do what the natural thing. What is the natural thing? Do a file progression approach, right? Hey, we were working on this set of routes this week. Let's add this capability to that set of routes, fix it. So now we have NCP enabled routes. Always work from the most critical thing down, right? People normally don't need to, and the cool thing about AI and NCPs and agents is like, it's not about reading data or getting summaries of data, it's about doing intents. So for example, you know, in payments processing, we have massive amounts of KYB, KYC information that we have to pull in order to underwrite you as a merchant, in order to do payment processing. how cool would it be if I just started, rather than filling out like a 40 to 60 form field situation, the AI agent with full understanding of being a boarding capability MCP, hey, go talk to that merchant, have a text conversation. Don't do text, but have a conversation in your platform in a secure setting in order for you to just go through that process with them. It explains so many things that many of us don't know. And I'm sure there's parts of your system and parts of your business that you're like, hey, you as a persona, as a consumer, but fully understand. The fallacy that we always run is other people understand what we're talking about. That's never the case. Agents with NCP actually bridges a lot of that if you give it enough context and enough descriptions. One of the things, again, like I showed, like a sample. Every single data point has to have a description, a sample, and even sometimes a next step in order for it to not only guide the user, but guide itself towards the next iteration of the system. Another cool thing that you could do with this is we use GitHub Actions. Imagine just putting a GitHub action in your pull request, in your CI/CD flow, where it says, hey, every time I do a pull request, if it has to do with the context of an API endpoint, go run this and build me a ticket or make some code in order to have these capabilities. We can actually automate a lot of this stuff away as we build the current things that we're normally building. We can actually start to sprinkle the API to MCP conversions in order for us to like progressively get to a full API to MCP and basically agentic capabilities. So this is how we're doing it. This is how I do, this is how one approach, there's many, but I believe something like this is what is going to be the future of just code-assisted capabilities in order for us to do big initiatives as different companies to just have this one capability, but this could be applied to many other different initiatives like fixing code, refactoring. I'm sure you all are trying the same things. The final thing I wanted to talk to about, so that's the end of the demo. I'm going to push that to GitHub, so if all of you are interested, you can go and see it there. But going back to what I was saying, discoverability and control are super important. If not, the agents won't understand what they need to do. So you need to have, you can also have it through the well-known /NCP in the root of every server. You need capabilities. You need auth. How does the agent do a session with your other agent or your MCP in order to keep tracking that person or business, right, that's trying to do an operation? You need operations, right? Like, and this one, it gets tricky. I like complexity scores because it actually tells the agent how much reasoning it's going to have to do. And again, it's very finicky. Even I fully don't understand it, but somebody smarter than me told me to put that there. So I did. And it's basically, this operation is going to have either many states or many error states. And understanding that there might be subsequent steps is actually going to help the model reason about its next step more quickly or just stop, right? If there's a high complexity rate, there also might be a high hallucination rate on this step. So it also informs itself of that. The schemas, can't stress that enough. We should just have that in every single API and be fully semantic, as well as the examples. If we provide enough context to the MCP, it would actually be able to manage itself better. And, you know, testing, monitoring, validation, cannot stress it enough. We're actually in the process of us ourselves understanding how we're going to manage this from SRE capabilities as well as just the observability of the system. What's the failure rate where a person needs to start, an SRE person needs to start going in and start either restarting the systems or calling an incident due to a higher error rate on an agent? We don't know. I'm sure none of the contracts that most of us has for SLOs ever had, hey, I need agent SLAs and SLOs available as part of your business agreement. Those are things that I'm sure every single one of us are going to have to figure out in the next 3 to 6 months, right? And obviously the automation, like we internally were trying to do a lot of natural language prompting and having one agent just add before every test suite, actually build the different prompting values and expecting results that gets basically a positive or negative value by our QA testing. So that is something that as we have progressively been working on it, it actually is doing a higher level of accuracy on our input-output testing for our AI agents. I have a monitoring dashboard. Obviously, this one is still in the works, but it actually captures a lot of things that I consider important for our current capabilities. One company that does a great job at this is Langsmith. You could take a lot of their capabilities, match it into a business dashboard that signals the health of your system. So for example, you know, I always think overall agent health. That's going to tell me a lot about what's happening in the system just from a very high level. Top failure reasons. Endpoint agent success rates. Our system gets measured by API route. Why not by tool? And why not by the integration, the entire composition flow of that? The usage patterns. The same way we collect Google Analytics in all our UIs and try to figure out where our customers are spending the time, AI agents are now our customers too. So now we need to understand where they're spending time as well in order for us to either increase the capacity, increase pricing, whatever it is that we want to do on those capabilities. Active alerts, and the basis of this talk, if you build every single test and you as a collective team agree, you could have an agent readiness score as a company. That's something that could be very valuable for you, either both internally and externally. So things to remember, and this applies to just basic engineering, but it really matters now more than ever. Take the time to normalize the data and label it. Too many times I've seen massive JSON columns in Postgres databases. Don't do that, please. It bothers me. Work from the outside in. Like a lot of us are still figuring a lot of this stuff out. And you have a business that your business is not AI. Like your value that you provide your customers might not necessarily be AI. Get somebody that their value prop is to provide AI capabilities and integrate those, understand, and then work your way into maybe your own proprietary capabilities when it comes to AI. Measurements and observability is key to understanding. I cannot stress that enough. That applies to every single engineering aspect. Like I said, the NCP usage journey and basically the agent usage journey is now the customer usage journey. You're now going to have what are my humans doing, what are my agents doing, and how do I maximize the value for both as entirely different personas that we need to manage. Things cost money, especially AI tokens. They cost a lot. My teams are very, very enthusiastic about their token spend, so I budget them. But it's one of those things like at some point in this new structure that we're going in, we're going to start, BC money is going to stop subsidizing token usage, right? So prices are going to go up, and the cost, understanding the cost of that is going to have to be top of mind for every single one of us. In a payment processing company, we earn cents and we earn fractions, basis points, right? Imagine if you adding just one of these capabilities deletes your entire margin. Do you still want to do that? Like, those are now the questions that we have to ask ourselves and ask in your own teams and your own businesses about how you're going to manage now this new operational cost to offering value to your customers, right? I want to leave you with this. We're in a new world. It's okay to try, fail, and pivot. I've done it way too many times. What is not okay is inaction to change. So we have to keep constantly evolving, constantly trying to figure out what is the next thing that we need to do. Thank you. I think I have 3 minutes if anybody has questions.
So this API like capabilities and the schema, it does look very much like the GraphQL. So does it mean like if we are having GraphQL API, it's like way more easier to integrate with the AIs?
So the reason the question is, how do we structure, why so many capabilities and how do we structure them, right?
You're like doing this with REST APIs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that you need to build this capability APIs
Mm-hmm.
and this schema
Mm-hmm.
description, right? But for GraphQL, I think those things are like already there because GraphQL is like cell descripting. So is it like better to use GraphQL?
Oof, we're gonna get into a different conversation. The GraphQL versus REST.
Yeah.
I honestly think whatever describes, whatever tools or architecture you have in your current business that maximizes the description of the resources that you can easily convert into a pure NCP capability is the way that you should go. At the end of the day, it has nothing to do with, are you contextualizing and describing all your data points? In GraphQL, you could just skip that self-description as well, and you would still get nowhere. So you want to the goal there is to maximize the labeling and descriptions of every single one of your data points.